Hey there, Barb. How are you doing?
Great.
Good. Good. Hey, you know what? We've lined up a conversation with one of our good friends, former Edmontonian, now Vancouver-based designer, Holli Yeoh. I am so pleased to have her with us today. Um, it's just so much fun to be able to share our conversations with really interesting people with everybody else, right?
Yeah. Hi, Holly.
Yeah.
Hey, Barb. Hey, Cynthia. Hello.
How are you doing, Holly?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Good, good. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about classes because one of the things that Barb and I do with you a lot is teaching. And we've got this great online platform that we started during COVID. And you have some of the most interesting and I wanted to say technical classes, but I don't want to scare people. It's not that they're technically hard. It's that you give people a lot of time to explore the technical aspects of the classes. And probably the first example is the class that's coming up in June, and that one's on fixing mistakes in lace and cables. And then we've got first sweater class coming up in the fall, and we've got toe-up socks coming up in the fall. And those two are multi-session classes. And so I wondered if maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, your teaching philosophy, like why. I guess what I'm getting at, Holly, is that sometimes your classes might be longer than other classes. And I think that's important to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important for the knitter to take what resonates with them or for them in the class and have a chance to put it into action. So if they're struggling with something, I can help them as opposed to listening to a webinar and then, they try to do it 3 months later when they finally need that technique and can't remember how to do it, right? So I want them to have a hands-on chance to practice it and also to decide whether it's for them or not. Um, you mentioned that my classes are technical and technique is really important to me or uh, good technique, I guess. But there's lots of ways to achieve the same end. So you don't have to do it my way. And if something that I'm being really nitpicky about is not important to you, then you don't have to adopt that into your knitting practice too. And I want to make that really clear to students as we're going through material so that they don't feel like I'm saying, no, you're doing it wrong, because there is no wrong way in knitting. There's lots of different ways to achieve the same results.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think something that you do emphasize in your classes is that there's no right way to do it, but that you have a particular focus on doing it because of your work as a designer. You want things, you want your designs to look really good. And that's, the reason why you do the things you do and you teach the things you teach. In the fixing cables and lace class, you have everyone do a swatch and you have them make mistakes in it. Do you find that
Yeah.
hard?
Do I find it hard to make the mistakes when I'm knitting my swatch? Yeah. Because I think we all inherently fix things as we go along. We might even not even realize we're doing it, right? And so to purposefully put mistakes into a piece of knitting, I mean, we also all make lots of mistakes. I'm not saying that we're infallible. I mean, being a knitter is making mistakes and learning from it. And I think fixing those mistakes is really integral to becoming a better knitter. Um, because as you begin to understand how the fabric is created, that length of string goes around and around and around the knitting needle, and it's creating wavy little lines if you look at it a couple rows below. And if you start to see how those stitches come together, then fixing the mistakes is a lot easier. But also learning how to fix mistakes helps you see how those stitches go together, so that it kind of all goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I think, it's sometimes people just it's nice on an online class to just stop and watch and listen to your voice explaining what's happening and where those knit stitches have gone to and where those purl stitches have gone to and what constitutes a yarn over. Those just to be able to watch you take a piece of knitting apart and then show how to put it back together again. So in case anybody's intimidated by this idea, I just want to reassure you that we do record the sessions. So if you decide to just kind of watch, and again, unlike a YouTube video or a TikTok video, it's done in real time. So you have time to ask questions and to see what's going on. And then Holly will give you time to try it yourself so you can ask questions in the moment. But if you can't attend or if you want to see it again, it is recorded, which is part of the beauty of the online classes. And
Yeah, sorry, I really like how you do that, that you offer that recording for a set period of time after the class, so that if, midway through the class, it just started to become too overwhelming. You don't need to panic because you've got that recording to refer back to, and just take another hour or two later in the week to revisit it. And trying out the technique a second time within the week is going to help cement it in your mind. So maybe some knitters like to just watch it first and then try it hands on. Some knitters want to, jump right in. We all learn differently, right? So I think having that recording it helps with the different way people learn.
yeah, exactly. And then in the fall, we've got you coming back to teach first sweater. And this is a great class. This is one you've taught a lot. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what first sweater entails.
It's a 4-week class. We meet once a week for an hour and a half, and we go through the steps of making a sweater. As you can see, it's a little baby sweater, and I realize not everybody has a baby in their lives to knit for. Um, the purposes of the class isn't to end up with a baby sweater as a project. It's to learn the steps in knitting a sweater. And so I designed a small sweater so that there wouldn't be as much homework between classes, and so that realistically people would get a chance to actually get to the next step that I want to teach in the next week. So there is homework between classes, but I clearly lay out what you need to have knit for the next class. And I, as far as sweater knitting is concerned, I strongly believe in seams. So I know maybe that's not the popular way of making sweaters these days, but I think seams make for an heirloom project. Seams, add longevity to a project. If you're making a sweater for yourself or for an adult, you want to be able to wear it for years, right? And
Yeah.
the in the round style just doesn't have that same structure, so it'll stretch out with wear over
There's
the years.
there's lots of in the round classes you can take too, right?
Oh
That
yeah,
sweater style isn't really that, there's not that much to it, right?
yeah,
Whereas knitting in pieces, there's a lot to learn and a lot of options I find for
yeah.
you to knit in pieces.
And even if you're a diehard in the round sweater knitter, or the theory of that sounds good, this class will still teach you a lot of valuable skills that are transferable. So I go in depth into increases and decreases, how to do a bias bind off, which creates a nice curved edge along the neck, like a round neckline, as opposed to the jaggedy stair step one. Um,
Yeah.
we cover picking up and knitting stitches, and that's not just along the sides of rows, the sides of stitches, but on the tops of stitches as well, and around that curved edge. So, I think when it comes to finishing a sweater, the place that a lot of knitters maybe have their downfall, they might be beautiful knitters, but if they're not finishing it nicely, it's going to be really obvious in this area, because when we look at people, we look at their faces, right? And what's just beyond the face is the neckline of your garments. And if there's like a big hole, and who hasn't had a big hole in when they've picked up stitches around the neckline, right? So I teach you how not to get those holes. um, those sorts of things draw the eye, right? So I want to elevate your knits from homemade to handmade, or help you elevate your knits. And if those things aren't important to you, that's fine too. You can learn the theory. I explain why I do the things that I do, and then you can decide whether, yeah, I don't care about that. I like holes around my neckline.
No, I think, Holly, that's the part about the class that our participants really treasure is the fact that you say I'm going to show you how I do it, because you have a design aesthetic, you have a particular way of doing things that looks good, and I think people really appreciate that. It's something that I think also, and we'll circle back to talk about the sock class that's coming up, but let's maybe switch over to designs for a second, because you're first and foremost, I think it's fair to say you're a knitwear designer,
Hmm.
and you have an aesthetic, and you have a background that makes you look for tailoring opportunities. And Barb and I are wearing a sample of your work. It's a design that you did for us called the Rutherford vest. We're each wearing it. And maybe I'll turn it over to you, Barb. Do you have any particular things about the vest that you've got on today that you like, that you think is like totally Holli Yeoh?
Okay, put me on the spot, right? Yeah.
I love those English tailored shoulders. What do you think
Oh,
about those? Yeah.
yes. Yeah, those are beautiful. And the whole Argyle design it was so in tune with the theme that we were going after, because we had photographed this on our university grounds in Edmonton. And so the whole vest was really preppy, and loved the Argyle design. And yeah, the English shoulders, I'm seeing those in so many garments now. And you were the first one to come up with that. So from what I saw, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. I wasn't the first to come up with it in hand knitting for sure, but
Yeah,
it's so if for folks who don't know what an English tailored shoulder is, actually, Barb, do you want to sort of
yeah,
lean over like that? So see how the seam sort of falls to the back of the sweater. It's around the back side of the shoulder, and what happens is all of the shoulder shaping happens on the back, and there's no shoulder shaping on the front at all. Um, and it makes for a better fit. It hangs better on your body, and it's sort of a nod toward commercially made clothes, or and that's it was I think developed when knitting machines became industrial knitting machines, came into play, and before garments were made by cutting fabric, right? And we're not going to knit a big rectangle and then cut it, especially as a hand knitter. We're not going to do that. um, so this shaping is easier to do on a knitting machine
isn't that
because,
interesting?
yeah, my understanding, I'm not a machine knitter, but my understanding is that anytime you need to do a decrease, you kind of need to stop and fiddle with it, right, to
Yeah,
make those stitches go in. And so if you're thinking in an industrial setting, if you need to stop the machine, it's not being productive, and it's
yeah,
costing the company more, right?
yeah,
So if those front arm um, front shoulders can just go straight up and be bound straight across, then that's a money savings. And as I say, all the shaping's done on their back. But it also, because we see it on commercial garments, and it's, especially like higher end, really nice fine knits and that sort of thing, because we see it in that setting, it looks more sophisticated. At least I think it does.
yeah,
And so that's one reason that I started exploring it, and then realized it actually hangs better on the body. When you have a seam that just goes straight across the shoulder, um, chances are it's going to fall to the back or the front. It's not going to just stay up there on your shoulder.
yeah,
So with this shoulder, I'm forcing it to fall to the back on purpose, and it will always be at the back. It will never fall to the front. So
yeah.
that.
Nice. And Holly, does it, the back piece, it goes straight across at the top too, then, right?
At the back neckline, yeah. So the
Yeah,
back piece has very sharply angled shoulders compared to a conventional sweater. And then the back neckline goes straight across. But
right.
because the front piece comes up and wraps around the back, you do get the back neckline does get dropped a little bit. So it also is the same as having a shaped back neckline without having to do the shaping, which is kind of nice.
Very nice. Yes. Fantastic. So, Holly, it just transitions into kind of the next question for me is how did you learn about all this? What's your background?
I have a fine arts degree, but I didn't learn anything to do with knitting or designing clothes in that. But problem solving, composition, all the stuff that all the fundamental things that you learn, um, uh, when learning fine arts. I studied textiles, ceramics, and jewelry at college, and then when I started designing knitwear, I used to always people would say, "Oh, Holly, you're so creative and you love knitting. Why don't you design?" And I'm like, there's so many great patterns out there. I'll never knit all the ones I would want to knit in a lifetime." But then I did decide I wanted to design. Um, I was making jewelry at the time, and it's toxic. um, you're exposed to a lot of chemicals and that sort of
Hard
thing.
on your
So
hands and things too. It can be very hard on you too.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And so when I decided I wanted to start a family, I decided I didn't want to be exposing myself to those toxins, because you can bring them home on your clothes, even if your child isn't in the studio. And I was sort of becoming less enchanted with jewelry making at the time. So I thought, oh, this is the perfect opportunity to dive into designing knitting. And then I just sort of kind of figured it out by the seat of, just figured that out. And I think most knitwear designers who write hand knitting patterns are probably in the same boat. There is no school you can go to specifically learn how to write a knitting pattern, how to design and write a knitting pattern. Obviously, there are programs for knitwear design intended for the fashion industry. Um, I did not do that. But I grew up sewing and knitting, and so I knew how clothes were constructed. And I
Did that help you, Holly?
oh,
Knowing how?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, and I just examined a lot of patterns, and I mean, I understood the basic principle of the math that's needed, right? You knit a gauge, you knit a swatch, measure the gauge, and then base your calculations on those numbers that off of your gauge swatch.
Yeah.
Well, Holly, it must have worked because recently we were talking to Kim Worker and Kate Atherley, who are Digits and Threads and 910
Mhm.
publications, and they've published some of your books. And we all agreed that your patterns, are tech edited. Like you tech edit them. I know you send them to a tech editor as well, but your patterns are always just like really, really well written. And so I don't know how you do that, Holly. It's amazing. You do a fabulous job
Thank you.
doing patterns.
Details have always been important to me. Attention to detail. That I would never want to send something out that I hadn't thoroughly vetted. So I possibly go through it more times than the average person might. But if I think I can make an improvement, I'll do it before I send it out to a tech editor. And I actually really enjoy the process of working with a tech editor because, sometimes if I'm having difficulty wording something to be clear, they're able to just zero right in on that. And it's always reassuring to have your math double checked. And usually the math is not problematic. I mean, there might be out by a stitch or something in the odd place, and I'll go back to my spreadsheet and realize, oh, made a mistake in my calculation. I grabbed information from the wrong cell on my spreadsheet. My theory was right. I understood how to do it. And that's why we have tech editors. We need them to catch those little mistakes, right?
Holly, you mentioned that you kind of started with when your kids were little. Has there been an evolution with your designs? And
Oh,
have
for
you
sure.
seen that?
Yeah, yeah. So my first pattern was, baby up to 2 years old. Those were the only sizes it offered. I was working with self-striping yarn, and the wider the garment, the more stitches on the needle, the narrower the stripes. And so I was limited by the self-striping yarn, and I wasn't sure if it would, work with a larger sizes. And honestly, with a newborn, you can't imagine that they're going to be any older than that. I know obviously they grow, but it's just so overwhelming, or at least I was quite overwhelmed with my newborn. um, and then as she grew older, I realized, oh, I need bigger sizes. And then as she became less interested in wearing things that mama knit, that's sort of when I segued into adult
Yeah.
knitwear.
And do you have any designers that influenced you a little bit in your designs?
So yeah, early on, I knit a lot of Debbie Bliss patterns, like before I was ever a designer. I think just because they were small little, baby sweaters, and they came together quickly, and
Debbie also has some really neat little design elements in her designs that I'm
yeah,
sure you would have loved.
yeah, yeah. So she, I was attracted to her work. I loved what Rowan was putting out with their magazine. So back in the, I don't know when, the 90s, I was, and the
Into
80s, I wasn't knitting a lot of Rowan. Um, and Lucy Neatby, as for what should be in a pattern and how detailed it should be, she was an influence for me for sure. And she was sort of one of the first self-publishing knitwear designers that I knew, and I had the opportunity early on to meet her as well. So I consider her a friend in the industry for sure. And
Mhm.
if I need advice or whatever, I can bounce ideas off of her.
Yeah. Yeah, that isn't that interesting because, she was all about technique too, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Doing things in different ways that you really might not have thought of. That's
yeah, yeah. So it could well be that I picked up a lot of that from her. But also with my fine arts degree, I remember in the jewelry studio, it was so important to our instructor that to communicate to us or teach us that the back of the piece is just as important as the front. So the back side of a brooch had to look just as good as the front. You couldn't be sloppy on the back. um, so if you soldered that pin back on, and it was, you had to clean up the solder and clean up the area around it so it looked just as good. And so that was really instilled in me, that craftsmanship was really important. um,
And you brought that to knitting.
yeah, yeah.
So, Holly, what's on your needles right now?
What's on my needles? I am re-yarning some older designs. And so I, silly me, I thought all I had to do was knit them. But, um, you know, um, the way I write a pattern, the language I use, the phrasing I use has evolved over the years, right? So there's nothing wrong with the pattern, but now I'm looking at it and going, yeah, I think I need to rework this now. So it's taken a little longer than I thought it was going to, but I'm enjoying sort of revisiting it.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's so nice to come out with something fresh and new, right?
Hmm.
New and improved.
Yeah, we're kind of thinking about doing the same thing, aren't we, Barb? About, taking
Mhm.
some of the patterns that we had you design for us in Epic and redoing them in some new yarns and some new color palettes and things like that. There's so many designs, Holly, that you've done for us. You are you're amazing. I think the idea, we'll say to you, we're thinking about doing this kind of collection. I think one of my favorites, Barb, I don't know if you agree or not, was the cabin collection, where we focused on Fiona Ellis put together this beautiful color kind of photo sheet for us, and it included things
Mm.
like, cabins and plaid and snow and all those things that you
Indiana
think
and
of, yeah. And I
canoes
think,
and
yeah, and I think you might have submitted like 12 designs.
probably sounds like me. So yeah, I mean that's something I hear a lot of wannabe designers say, "Oh, well, I submitted something and it wasn't accepted." And I say, well, how many designs did you submit to that call? One. Well, you need to give them choice. They might have liked your work, but maybe that one design didn't actually fit with the storyline that they were pulling together, or fit with the other submissions that were, or it was too similar to somebody else's submission. Not to suggest by any stretch that it was copied, but there's only so many ways to make sweater, right? I like to submit lots, and again, that comes from my art college background, or at least from the teachings of the head of the jewelry department. You know, we would make one piece of jewelry, and she would say, "That's great. Now make 10 more." And she didn't mean go do a production line and make 10 identical pieces, but she, like riff off that idea, make another one, and then another one that's slightly different, and then another one, and by the time you get to that 10th one, that'll be the one. Yeah, the first one's okay, but that 10th one, you'll have worked through your ideas. So I do that to a great. Obviously, I don't submit 10 designs that are all very similar to one another, but I try to provide variety and a selection so I have a better chance of having something chosen. And the beauty of having submissions not accepted is that you can resubmit them elsewhere later. So I have this great archive of good pattern ideas that just weren't suitable for whatever publication at whatever time. And I just rejig them for the new submission.
Holly, do you swatch all your designs as well?
Oh, yeah.
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 So you must have an amazing swatch collection.
Yes. I have 2 huge Rubbermaid bins. I think I need to start a third one full of swatches. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of my design submissions begin with a swatch, or I mean, a swatch needs to be part of it because you have to provide some visual, right?
Yeah.
More than just a sketch. So even if it's just stocking stitch, I'll have a swatch, and maybe, if it's just stocking stitch, then maybe it's some detail about how the edging is attached. So that will be on the swatch, for instance. Um, yeah, and sometimes I think, oh, couldn't I just use this picture of the stitch pattern in this stitch dictionary? I don't feel that's appropriate because that's not my swatch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
So,
a lot. It's a lot.
yeah. Lots of that would be really interesting one day to do a review of your swatches.
Yeah, yeah, you'll probably recognize some of them.
Wouldn't that be fun? Okay. So Cynthia, where to now?
Well, I see that Nigel has entered the waiting room. So maybe we'll bring Nigel in now. Does that sound good to everybody?
Mhm.
Sure.
Okay, go. Okay, Barb, we're back. We took a little break because we wanted to bring another person into our conversation, a very special person to us, but also to Holly. And so we're going to turn the spotlight back over to Holly and let her introduce our guest. Here we go. Hi, Holly.
Hello. So this is really exciting. Our guest is Nigel Pottle, and he is my stepfather. So
Hello, Nigel.
Good
welcome.
morning. Good morning. Thank you.
So Nigel is a knitter, and we have been knitting together for 44 years now. Nigel, did you realize it was that long?
No, no, no. I don't want to believe it, but it's true. You're quite right. It has been 44 years. I know.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So probably I am definitely influenced by you and your knitting since I was a kid when I first met you.
Yep. You were 12 or 13, I think,
Yeah, that's right. So now
and
everybody
I
knows
was a
how
little
old I am.
older.
Thank you.
Math. It's all math. Somebody, you're too slow to do that.
So, Nigel, tell us, where did you learn to knit?
I learned at my mother's knee. Of course I did. My mother was a crocheter and a knitter and a sewist, so she did an incredible amount of stuff all the time. She was always doing something. And I asked her to teach me to crochet because it looked cool. But when after a while I realized I didn't want to knit little doilies, and I think that's what my mother was doing, or crochet swans with pink beaks, what my mother would starch with some kind of mixture that she would use, and then make them all stiff, and then she could put candies in them, or flowers, or awful things. Not me, not me. That's not my style. So I switched over to knitting because I knew with knitting you can actually make a sweater or something. But I really didn't make a sweater until I went to university. I must confess. And before that, it was just scarves. But at university, I made myself a couple of sweaters at the beginning of my career there. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. Two sweaters I loved, I have to say that, and I wish I could find the patterns because I just loved those two sweaters. They were very different, but they were both great. One of them was an all over cable, which we might talk about later. With Bespoke. Anyway, that was my career. So I started there, and I've been knitting ever since. I met Holli in Calgary when I moved there, and she and her uh, with her father, and she came down and we discovered we knit, so we knit from then on. So really, it has been a long
Oh, that's so nice. That's really nice. And I want to talk to you both about Bespoke. So this is a cardigan pattern, and maybe Holly, I'll let you take this part of the chat. Where did the idea for Bespoke come from? What was Nigel's role in it? And tell us a little bit about how you've chosen to publish this pattern.
Sure. So I decided that I wanted to give Nigel the gift of a knitting pattern for his birthday, and not just any knitting pattern. Like, I didn't want to buy one off of Ravelry and go, here you go. I wanted to design something for him, but I wanted to design it for him to knit for himself. Since, you know, a lot of the joy that knitters get is the actual knitting, right? So, and I wanted him to be involved in the design of it so that indeed it not only would he enjoy the experience of knitting it, but also the experience of wearing it. And so this was your birthday present. Now I can't quite remember which year, a couple of years ago. I think it was published about a year and a half ago, so it would have been the year before that's actual
time.
gift,
Yeah.
I think.
Maybe the year I turned some magic number that ends in zero.
Oh, well, that could well be. That could well be.
That was a while ago now.
And then the name, hence the name.
Hence the name. Yeah, it's a completely bespoke pattern for Nigel. And of course, being a knitwear designer who publishes, it didn't make sense for me to just design it in one size. So I wanted to, be able to publish the pattern. And so I pitched the idea to Digits and Threads, which is, you mentioned earlier, Kim and Kate. They are the editors of Digits and Threads. It's an online magazine that sort of centers on the Canadian fiber industry. So I thought this was the perfect sort of opportunity to get this pattern into other people's hands. And when I started, I was getting a little jealous of Nigel's sweater, and I wanted it too. So then I thought, well, why don't I just make it gender inclusive? And, gender inclusive doesn't just mean design something to fit a man and just say, yeah, it's just an oversized woman's sweater. We have different proportions. Everybody has different proportions in their bodies. Some people have wider shoulders, some people have narrower shoulders. So I wanted the pattern to be able to be as inclusive as possible. And boy, that's a lot of pattern writing.
Yes.
It was really the equivalent of about 4 patterns kind of mashed together with the opportunity to customize different areas of the pattern. And so for one section of the pattern to then work with narrower shoulders or wider shoulders, the instructions sort of had to diverge and go different directions. And it was a really interesting challenge to write it and grade it for all of those sizes.
Wow. So how did that happen, Holly? Gosh,
Um,
did you play with the shoulder sizing and the
yeah,
arm?
definitely. So, we usually choose our size based on chest circumference, and so the lower half of the pattern would be would be the same, depending what chest circumference you're aiming for, and then the upper half then sort of segues. Well, if with this chest circumference, if you have narrow shoulders, go this way. If you have wider shoulders, go this way. And then sleeve length as well was factored in, and body length.
Wow. So did it start out as a pattern and become a book?
Kind of, yeah, yeah. So, because I wasn't publishing it myself, I wasn't really thinking about it from that perspective, and I got to work with Kate Atherley for the tech editing, and we had some really interesting, exciting conversations around that. Um, and then Digits and Threads decided that they wanted to publish it as a printed pattern as well, to be able to sell it at events like Knit City, or I've forgotten what the new one in Edmonton is called. They just changed their name.
Gathering Threads.
Gathering Threads.
Yep.
That's right. And other events as well, of course. And so when they printed it out, I was so surprised at how many pages it was. I mean, it makes sense. It needed to be that many pages. And of course, as a knitter, you're not following the instructions on every single page. You work up to this section, and it'll say if you want wide shoulders, go here. If you want narrow shoulders, go here, or whatever, right? So you're sort of guided through, and there's big
Choose
chunks of
your
the
own
pattern.
adventure.
Yeah, choose your own adventure. That's a good way of saying it. That's right.
So Nigel, did you knit your bespoke cardigan?
I did knit my bespoke cardigan. I didn't only knit it though. I was involved with the design from the very beginning. Holly said she wanted to do it. We sat down together. After a while, it took us a while to get around to doing it. We sat down. She brought samples. She showed me samples of things that she thought might be interesting pattern ideas. We looked at that. I chose one I liked, and then we talked about shot sizing, how long it should be, how short it should be, etc. I chose to do a short one, so it's really kind of bomber jacket length rather than a long one, which is kind of lazy me, but I also wanted one that didn't come down to my knees. Which is also a problem. It's right here in my lap.
Oh.
So,
Tell
yeah,
us.
so I did, and it's my favorite color. I got to choose the color, so that's part of the excitement.
Nice. What yarn did you use, Nigel?
This is Sweet Georgia's yarn. It's a DK weight. I'm not an expert at Sweet Georgia and what's what, but it's a DK weight yarn, and it's semi-solid, of course. So that was a challenge for me and for Holly, because she knit one as well in the same material, the same yarn. She'll probably know better about that than I do. But
Nigel, can you speak to your favorite elements of the sweater?
my favorite elements, well, actually the collar. I love the collar. I love the way it fits around my neck. I also love, it's got cables all over. And actually, the sweater that I knit when I was at university years ago, in fact, had an all-over cable pattern. So here we go. And I love the buttons I found at Skacel, which is a shop in Vancouver, which has everything under the sun for sewists and other makers, but not a lot of great yarn. Unfortunately, that's not their thing. So I knit. I like that. I like the. I like this. There's a triangle or a diamond shape on the arm. It's really cool, and there's one at the back as well. Look how that collar fits. Isn't that great? Perfect.
You look
It's
fabulous, Nigel. That really
yes,
fits you nicely, and it's your color too.
definitely.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful sweater on you. Love that
Thank you.
collar too.
Really nice. So, so it's probably too hot today to wear that sweater for very long, in Vancouver. Holly said it's a
Yes.
nice warm day. Oh, that's really good. So, Nigel, tell us a little bit more about, what you're designing these days, because you did a design for us. In fact,
Yes.
I'll hog the camera here for a minute and I'll put it on. Here is,
Yay. Looks
uh, this,
fabulous. Looks
this is
fabulous.
rotund.
I love
Thank
it. Wow, we got it all. Good, good.
Here,
Yeah.
I'll steal the spotlight here for a second. Yeah, this is done in Epic and it's called the Rotunda hat and cowl. And then you did another version for us using El Rio, which was our 100% alpaca yarn. And there's a hat and a cowl. I left my hair down today, so if it got messy, it would be okay. But this is so lovely, Nigel. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, your design experience and, what you like about designing and other patterns?
This one here was inspired simply by the fact that I saw this really cool sweater where they solved the problem of how to do a seam that didn't look awful. Uh, so as you can see, the stripes that go up the center are that solution. And I decided that it would, if I added a few, it would be even more interesting and it would make this cool hat. And at the beginning, it's called Rotunda. At the beginning, I was thinking of the hat itself first as the dome of a church. That's sort of where that came from. I was thinking of the Duomo in Florence, as a matter of fact. So that made me, and I'd been there many years ago with Holly, as a matter of fact. I think Holly, were we in
Yes.
Florence together? Yeah, we were.
Yes. Yes.
A
We
very
met.
long
We
time
met
ago.
on the
Yeah,
Ponte
that was really
Vecchio
cool.
at 1 o'clock in the afternoon under the middle arch on June 15th, I think it was,
Well, good for
1988.
you. You remember more than me in terms of the detail, right? So that's where the idea was basically came from a sweater and pom pom. I apologize, I don't remember the name of the knitter who designed it now. But I then saw that and I saw how the shaping, and I thought the shaping is fabulous because I can do the shaping in this and hide it really, really well. So I was very pleased with that. It was kind of like a discovery of a sort. And then the cowl, I thought the cowl is just don't put in a curve, and look, you've got something warm around your neck. The yarn, the Rio yarn, was just lovely to work with. In fact, I'm knitting not with Rio right now, but I'm knitting with 100% alpaca as well. Lovely, it's such a nice feel to alpaca. It's cool stuff.
It is cool stuff, and it's so nice because there are several manufacturers, companies that make 100% baby alpaca. So we're so happy with that because we can transition and give customers different recommendations on different yarns. Yeah, are there any other sort of fibers that you think would be good for Rotunda? I know you designed it in our Epic 100% wool yarn as well.
Yeah. I like a softer yarn. It's going to go around your neck, right? So you want to have something soft. So, but I'm perfectly capable of using a soft weight yarn to do something like that as well. As a matter of fact, the next project I'm working on, which is connected to what I'm knitting here, will be in 100%. Not 100%. It's soft weight yarn, so it's got some nylon. But I got some yarn from Gage Dye Works that I got at my total accident in a retreat that they were having on Pender Island, where I happened to be, and I met some knitters, and they invited me to join them at the event in the afternoon. They were having a sale, and it turned out I wasn't even crashing the party because they'd invited any knitters who were on the island to come. I didn't know that, but I was there. So I bought some yarn from Gage Dye Works from Catherine, which is lovely. and I have a plan for that. So I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to, let all the things out of the bag at once. But it's I'm working on a cowl, and I started with a prototype. The prototype was okay, but I have an ugly seam, and I thought, wait, why didn't I use the cool idea I had in Rotunda? So I used the cool idea I had in Rotunda, and it worked, but there was still a flaw. And I thought, I've got to fix this. So now it is totally reversible because I fixed the flaw at the back. So it's actually totally reversible. There's absolutely no evidence. The only thing is you have to be very careful how you hide your yarns when you sew them in. I always hate that part, don't you? Don't we all?
Yes, sewing in the ends, especially if you want it to be reversible. That's a
Yes.
challenge. And I bet Holly has a class on that.
Well, in fact, speaking of Holly, the ones I've done so far, I plan when I write this pattern down, it's going to say to bind off using a technique that on this video that my stepdaughter Holli Yeoh has done just for you on how to bind off a yarn that matches these cast on in a long tail cast on. So I'm planning to. Nice. I haven't asked for permission yet, but of course she's right there now. Holly, can I?
Yes, of course.
I'll link you, then you're almost more famous.
That's so nice. So, Nigel, where are you publishing? Are you publishing in like?
I'm hoping this is one. I've never been very good at getting my stuff done. I have made, I have knit so many socks in my own designs and never ever put anything down. I published a couple of things with, oh dear, what's the name of the company? Skacel Knitting. They purchased a couple of my sock patterns several years ago. And they're actually available for free. If you want to go on to Skacel Knitting and look for their stuff, you can find it. They have, one is called Tom and Ethel, because it's two different versions of the sock. One is top down and one is bottom up. Otherwise, they're exactly the same. But I like the idea of being able to design things that work both directions. So I made it. That's what Tom is one and Ethel is the other. You can guess. You can decide which one you want to be the top or which one is the bottom if you want.
And Tom and Ethel are your parents.
Tom and Ethel are my parents. And actually, I have a confession. I've never told you this, Holly. I don't think my older brother Jim reminded me that my father's name is really not Tom.
Oh, I didn't know
Growing up, it's a bit complicated. My father's name was Thomas Addy, not Ed, but Addy Pottle, and he was known when he was growing up, and my mother called him Ed. But when he moved to my hometown, it was a mining company, and he was registered because his first name was Thomas. He got called Tom by everybody. So he's Tom and Ed, but I should have called it Ed and Ethel. Of course I should, but I didn't. The other sock is actually a slipper sock called Baronio Barb. Baronio.
Wow. Okay. I'm heading over to Skacel after this to check it out. What's that one about?
It's a cable pattern with a staghorn cable in the center going up the front. So that's why it's called Baronio, because I imagine that, wearing your staghorn on your wall, but on your feet instead.
Very nice. I got to check that one out. Aren't socks a great canvas for designing?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they are. They are fabulous. And I think cowls are just as good. They're wide open. You can do so much when you're wearing a cowl or making a cowl. And I love wearing them. They're really more comfortable than the scarf. You don't have to worry about the ends dangling and where they're going or the fact that they're too bulky somewhere. You just put it around your neck and you're happy.
Nice.
I like that. I've got one here that I knit. There's nothing like it's not the one that I made. This is a design by a guy called Kenneth Moore, and it's a brioche pattern. And as you can see, kind of cool how it works. The pattern, the Homestead Harvester, he's the designer. Anyway, I can't remember the name of his company right now. But I met him at the men's knitting retreats we have in the end of August, beginning of September in Seattle area. And this design comes with a warning because there are definitely not safe for work pictures involved in it, or maybe not safe for human content. It's very strange. But you can get a non-photograph, a non-creepy version in the pattern. Kenneth is a little unusual.
That looks beautiful, Nigel, and I compliment you on your brioche.
Yeah.
A lot of times people have, that can be complicated, understanding a brioche knit and a brioche purl in two colors and with increases and
Yeah.
decreases,
And that one looks
Well,
like entrelac too.
yes,
It's shifting.
it's angled. So the increases and decreases you have to do in the work makes it a real challenge. You can, and I always
Wow.
tell people, you can knit brioche. Brioche is easy to knit. Just don't drop a stitch. That's my
Yeah.
rule. Ever. They're fixable, but boy, it's a fiddly, a weird thing, and you have to really switch your mind around to get it to work properly.
Oh, that's really nice, Nigel. So are you publishing on Ravelry as well?
I'm hoping to do this one. If you go online, you won't find any patterns that are in my Ravelry page that I've designed, except for the two that somebody else has published, and yours, pardon me, as well. But I really want to get this done. I want to finally do one thing. This is my old age project, to actually get something published on Ravelry that I can see what my results are like. It's cool to get someone like you, Barb and Cynthia, to publish things for me, because you do all the heavy loaded work and all the marketing, etc., which I have not got. So I'm just sort of throwing it out there, and I'll see what it does. And the nice thing about the pattern I'm working on is not only is it reversible, but it's totally different on each side. They don't look the same at all, but they're both gorgeous. And it's also in a brioche, but it's a really lovely brioche. I find it extremely meditative. It's really funny. I sit there knitting, and there's little spots where you have to stop, and it's almost like when you're breathing and you get into the rhythms, and then your mind goes crazy about other things in meditation, and then you hit this little spot where you think, "Oh, I have to concentrate now," and it brings you back. So it's really weirdly meditative. I love it. It's very simple. It's a cable, not a cable, a brioche tends to be like knit one, throw one of the sort, So I just find it super relaxing, and I hope the people who knit it find it just as relaxing. It's comfortable.
That's
With
really
that
nice.
description, I think it's going to be a top seller, Nigel. Who doesn't want to?
Yeah,
Who
somebody has
doesn't
to
want to
market
get
it.
into that rhythm and relax? And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds
Well,
delightful.
I have to figure out how to do that. How to tell people that part of the knitting is the fact that it's really super relaxing. I've got it. I'm aiming it at several different markets, so it's coming up, and I haven't quite figured that out. I was thinking maybe I should ask you guys, but it's really not your job, to tell me how I would make it so that I have one pattern for one group of people that other people wouldn't be interested in, but I have a pattern for another group of people that group is interested, and I have a pattern that can be general for everybody. So I'm trying to figure out how do I publish something that's exactly the same in three different niche markets.
You just did it, Nigel. I think that clip of how you are talking about it is perfect because it appeals to all of those segments. Cynthia will just have to send you a clip of this video, and you can attach it to your pattern.
That's a good idea.
It's an interesting idea, isn't it? And we could chat about that a little bit. It's the idea that, you've got a design, you've got you've got ideas about it, you've got the inspiration from it, and now you're trying to figure out what's the best way to convey that to people who might, end up being as excited about it as you are. And so,
And different groups of people, different audiences too, right? Because you
Yes,
talk three
yes,
different audiences.
right.
yeah.
And so I think, that's where, maybe Holly, you'd like to jump in on this too. It's how does a designer get the word out about your patterns? How do you engage your audience? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's the part that I struggle with the most. So ever since I've been publishing with third-party publishers, they take care of that. um, yeah, I don't do much self-publishing anymore as a result. Um, I know the things I'm supposed to do. I just, you have to figure out who your ideal customer is, and then speak directly to them, and that sort of thing. And it's just not something that comes naturally to me.
I think, you do it in that you think so much about the end person who's going to be wearing your garment. For example, in Bespoke, you talked about it being sort of gender neutral, appealing to, many different groups of people and body shapes. Um, that in itself, I think, is the key. That's, you've got a product that can appeal to so many different body shapes and groups of people, men, women, all genders. Is
Yeah.
there anything that you can add to that?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Well,
an
and then,
important part of your design, right?
yeah, 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 and the diverse size range as well
Mm.
is always important. Um, less so for cowls,
Yeah.
although not a bad idea to offer more than one size.
That's true. I suppose so, so maybe, the idea is, do you make a scarf? Do you make a cowl? Do you make a shawl? And are these accessories, are they intrinsically feminine or masculine,
Mhm.
or does it even matter? I don't feel like there's any more the notion that just because a guy is wearing a shawl doesn't mean that it's feminine. It just means that it's a nice accessory to have on, for the day. I don't know. What do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. We should be able to wear what we want to wear, regardless of, you know, what's stamped on our birth certificate.
Yeah, well, I've actually found that I started knitting a triangle shawl. And then I started thinking, no, they're not, maybe they're not shawls, maybe they're scarves. I'll use a different word. The shawl to me does sound like little old lady wrapped up and looking a little, cold and sugary. Whereas a scarf is a fashion accessory as well. So I started knitting triangular scarves that I wear all the time. I love them. I love the way they fit in the front. I love the way that I can drape them around and do different things with them. I mean, hey, and these days, as you see on the streets, young men wearing bright pink, and they're wearing them in a masculine manner as opposed to it's not something ironic anymore. It's not something odd. It's just that that's who people are. And people are,
Mhm.
I think it's really, we've got that gender expression going a lot differently. Of course, I live in a city where that happens a lot as well. I live in Vancouver. I live in the West End. It's got a very large population of gay people and trans people. So it's a great area to be in because of that. Lots of different fashion.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
if you remind me that words are really important, right? I mean, the word shawl does have a real connotation to it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, what do you think about wrap
About wraps,
as a word, as a descriptive word?
wrap, yeah. A wrap still sounds like something you're going to wrap around yourself as opposed to it's. I call my scarves, my shawl scarves, triangles, scarfy, shawly things.
Yeah. Or a
Is that a good
square.
word? Scarfy, shawly things. That's my name.
Yeah. I think it's really a good time to be designing and to be having, as you said, Barb, that, like with Holly and Nigel, having the end product in mind. And I have this vision now, Nigel, of, like walking in Vancouver and it being a bit more fashionable because more people are expressing themselves in a variety or a diversity of ways. So that might segue us into a little bit of a chat about where you guys live and what is, some of your favorite things to do in Vancouver. If we were going to come to visit you in Vancouver, what would you recommend would be a good spot or a good place to hang out? And maybe we'll start with you, Nigel, and then move to Holly. What's your favorite hangout?
I've got a couple of places where I hang out. Actually, I go to a place that I really love called Cafe Bellagio. It's on Cole Harbour in Vancouver, so I get exercise because it's actually on the far side of the city from where I live. So I get up and I get ready and I go. I walk there. I get my good walk in the rain sometimes. in the you know, I do walk in the rain because we Vancouverites have to. Otherwise, we'd be inside for months and months on end. And Cafe Bellagio has the owner is a baker, and he's learned his skills, and he makes the most amazingly beautiful pastries. They are gorgeous, honest to God. I wish I had pictures to show you, but I can't. But he makes these perfect domed things that have, and then he tells you what's in them. They have a layer of this, and then they have a filling of that, and then they have a covering of that, and they're all very, very French-like. And he makes fabulous croissants as well, and they also serve other things. But I'm sitting on the seawall, basically at Cole Harbour, looking at the boats going by, at the seaplanes flying. I have a view of the North Shore Mountains from the window, and now, of course, it's in the outside, so I can sit outside and enjoy the air as well. It's a great location. I love it. It's on Cole Harbour. My second place is the place which actually is a gelato. It's called Doro Gelato e Cafe. And it's on Denman Street, so it doesn't have the fabulous view, but the people there are just the most charming people, the people who run it. When you get a coffee, you always get a little tiny biscotti, which has a different name than a biscotti. I can't remember what it's called now. Cantucci, maybe. Cantucci. Little tiny biscotti that you can drop in your coffee. And of course, the gelatos are fabulous. I love the gelato. I was once offered one for free. Do you like gelato? Well, yeah. Would you like one? Yes. So I said, what? She said, what do you want? I said, you know what? You choose for me. And she chose the flavor that I would never have chosen on my own. I get chocolate salted caramel coffee, like boring. She gave me one called Amarena Crocantina, which is cherries and a crunch of brittle that they have, and they mix it in. When they scoop it, they mix the brittle into it, and it is so delicious. And I said to the young woman, I'm so glad you gave me this. I would never order it on my own, but I love it. Holly is in a totally different neighborhood than I am in Vancouver, so she has special places that she goes that are very different, I'm sure, and just as enticing in whatever way.
Yeah, so I have my favorite ice cream, Ernest ice cream, which is special to Vancouver. They have a couple of locations now, maybe 3 locations now. Ernest, on beautiful hot summer days like today, the lineup is around the block. And it's worth it to line up for their ice cream. I only ever order the salted caramel there. I'm sure the others taste fine, but this salted caramel just is the best ever that I've ever had. So if you visit Vancouver, do check out Ernest Ice Cream. And another recent favorite place that my husband and I like to go to is the restaurant called Published. It's on Main Street, so it's just a few blocks from where I live. And Published is a Michelin star restaurant now. I think last year they got their stars. I'm not sure how many they have. And prior to that, they had been voted the best restaurant in Canada. And it's a really interesting dining experience. You're meant to share your dishes, which doesn't always work since I don't eat meat and my husband really likes meat. But we share some appetizer-y things, and then we each get something that's sort of meant to be the entree. But all the plates are small as well, so you can try a variety of things, and it's just a really lovely dining experience. Really interesting combinations of ingredients and tastes.
What's your favorite dish, Holly?
Oh, the milk buns with bee pollen. They don't sound very glamorous at all, but they're really yummy. Oh, and I've forgotten what the name of the dessert is. It's is a combination of like a chocolate ganache with like a peanut butter semifreddo and some banana sorbet. It's kind of deconstructed, so all together on a plate, and not overly large, so you don't feel weighed down at the end of your meal when you have it. But yeah, everything's good. The halibut that I had the other night was really good. We went there for our anniversary, and it was delicious. Everything I've tried there has been delicious.
It's really interesting to see all the very cool restaurants that are coming up. I think culinary skills are becoming a thing that's more the norm, and restaurants are embracing that and coming up with such great food. And wow, no matter what city you go to.
That's right.
Thank you for sharing yours. Those are 4 things I've written down.
I saw you making notes. That's great.
I'm going to be going to Vancouver in July, so I'm going to check them out.
Perfect.
Nice.
Oh, nice time of year to be here too.
Yeah. We will also, for those of you who are watching this, put notes into the show notes down below to help you find some of the designs and the yarns and the restaurants and the gelato and the ice cream that Nigel and Holly have told us about. So that'll all be in the description down below. And we look forward to coming and visiting you, Nigel and Holly, in Vancouver. Fingers crossed, maybe we'll be able to come this fall. And
Knit City?
That's right.
We had a great time at Knit City, Montreal, and it's been a while, right? COVID has, of course, changed the environment for a lot of us, especially related to travel, and so we haven't been out to Vancouver for a while, but it's just a train ride away, right, Barb?
That's right.
You can fly to
You can fly as well, yes.
Yeah.
But these days the price of flights is, making train travel a little more economical, relatively speaking. So
yeah. And I love trains. Love trains.
Well, we're so lucky because both of our cities are located on a main train line that runs across Canada. So it's definitely a possibility.
Well, we want to say thank you so much for spending some time with us today and chatting with us. Nigel, you are delightful. It's always lovely to have you come in the conversation. And Holly, you're amazing. We feel so lucky to be able to call you a friend, and we just love working with you and hanging out with you. So
me too. Right back at you.
So I hope you guys have a really lovely day, the rest of your day, and Barb and I will see you again soon, either on an online workshop or maybe through the purchase of a pattern from Skacel or otherwise. And Nigel, we'll look forward to chatting with you more when you get your design. All written up, give us a call and we will brainstorm a little bit about marketing.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice.
Just one last question. Where do we get Bespoke from?
Oh, that's a good question. So you can get it from Digits and Threads. I'll provide you with a link, which will be in the show notes. And if you're a member of Digits and Threads, if you're a studio member, which is sort of the highest level of membership, it's free. If you're an armchair member, you get a discount, and you are also able to purchase it even if you aren't a member. So I will provide that information for you.
That's wonderful. And there's just one other thing, Holly. You have another book with Digits and Threads, right?
Yeah, my mending book.
Share with us just a little.
Yeah. So I wrote several tutorials on sock mending for Digits and Threads. that were sort of published over a series of time. And they decided to make a little booklet because, when you're sitting down mending, I mean, yeah, you can pull out your iPad, but then, the screen goes to sleep, if you're following along on a tutorial, right? So this booklet is handy because you can have it open in front of you. It's small scale. It'll fit in your knitting bag. And they've been really popular.
And it's focused on mending.
Yeah, it's focused on mending. That's right. I show 3 different mending techniques for socks. And I
There
can
you
see
go.
it behind Cynthia there.
Yes.
On the shelf.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, because those are such great little resources. Everybody needs one of those in their sock project bag. I save up my socks until I have like about 6 of them, and then I'll mend them all at once.
Oh, good for you.
Wow.
Yeah. I have a big pile that needs some attention.
I should give mine to you, Holly.
Yeah, I
You
know.
can mend them. Well, you can use them as samples then. Okay, I don't want them back.
I'll teach you how to do it.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. I could buy the book. I'm a member of Digits and Threads, so maybe I could get it for free too.
Yeah, so all of the articles are available on their website that you can access through the membership.
Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Holly and Nigel, for hanging out with us. We hope you have a great month, a great year, and we'll talk again soon. Okay.
That sounds
Take
great.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
My
having
pleasure. It's great to chat with you.
us.